I want you to listen to something. Not with your ears. With your gut. The part of you that has always known, long before the evidence arrived, that something was wrong. Picture the interior of a commercial work van at 2 in the morning. The dashboard console glowing faintly, green and blue, the colors of instruments that are always on, always watching, always recording. The front windshield dark. The street outside empty. And on the passenger seat, a pair of heavy headphones. Inside those headphones, audio. Not music. Not a phone call. The specific, unmistakable audio of my brother's voice in the back of my vehicle, coordinating a theft ring at 1 in the morning, using my van as the getaway vehicle, while calling me, and I am going to quote him exactly, a clueless idiot who leaves the keys in the mudroom. He had been borrowing my van for 3 months. Late nights only. 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. Always a different excuse, always the same defensive posture when I asked questions, always the keys tossed back onto the hood with a little too much energy for someone who claimed to have just spent the evening with a girl. I had a gut feeling. I ignored it for 2 months longer than I should have. And then I stopped ignoring it. And I listened to what the dashcam had been recording the whole time. They expected me to keep looking away. To keep accepting the missing fuel and the strange scratches and the chemical smell I couldn't identify. They didn't realize that the small memory card in my rearview bracket had been quietly building a case file that would bring investigators to our front door by 10 o'clock the next morning. This is what happened between 2 in the morning and sunrise. And if you have ever had a gut feeling that someone you trust is using you as a shield for something dark, this is exactly what happens when you stop looking away and look at the evidence instead. Drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from. And if you believe that protecting a toxic family member should never come at the cost of your own safety and your own legal future, like this video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Because we are just getting started. Let me take you to 2 o'clock in the morning. I was standing in the garage. No lights on, I had decided not to turn them on, which was a decision I had made deliberately, though I would not have been able to explain exactly why at the time. Sometimes the body knows what the mind is still catching up to. I had a flashlight. I was holding it at my side, not pointed at anything yet, just holding it the way you hold something when you are waiting. The side door of the garage opened. Marcus came through it the way he always came through it at this hour, quickly, with the movement of someone trying to be quieter than they actually are. He had the van keys in his hand. He tossed them onto the hood of the van with a metallic clatter that he immediately seemed to regret making. He was breathing harder than a drive to a girlfriend's house would account for. His hands had something on them, dark, particulate, the kind of grime that gets into the creases of your knuckles when you have been handling metal in the dark. He wiped them on his jeans with the practiced motion of someone who has done this before. He saw me. His posture shifted. The specific shift of a person who has been caught doing something and has not yet decided on the story. "Why are you staying up tracking my hours?" he said. The offense in his voice was immediate and loud, the way offense always is when it is being used as a shield. "I told you, I'm just trying to clear my head and see a girl. Stop being an overbearing, controlling psycho." He adjusted his jacket. The motion exposed something on his forearm, a scrape, fresh, the kind you get from a sharp edge in the dark. I looked at the scrape. I looked at the keys on the hood. I looked at his hands. I did not say any of the things I could have said. I caught the keys off the hood. I checked the odometer reading against the number I had photographed before he left. 63 miles. The girlfriend he claimed to be visiting lived, he said, 30 miles away. Round trip, 60 miles. 3 extra miles. It was not the miles. It was the pattern. The grime. The breathing. The scrape. The jacket adjusted 1 second too late. The story that almost added up and didn't quite. I looked at my brother. I said 2 words. "Get to bed." He stared at me for a moment, recalibrating, unsure whether the absence of confrontation was capitulation or something else. Then he went inside. I listened to the door close. And then I got into the van, locked the doors, and sat in the dark for a moment before I reached up to the rearview mirror bracket and removed the microSD card. He had taped a square of dark velvet over the front-facing camera lens. He had thought about the visual record. He had not thought about the audio. Because the audio system on a commercial-grade dashcam is independent, internal, and, as I had specifically configured it when I purchased the unit, backed up continuously to an encrypted cloud server that he did not know existed and had never had access to. I plugged the card into the tablet I kept in the center console storage. I put on the headphones. And I pressed play. Before I tell you what was on those files, I need to tell you what the van actually was. Because I think when people hear, "My brother borrowed my car," they picture a personal vehicle. A convenience. Something you share the way families share things. This was not that. The van was a fully outfitted commercial work vehicle. I am an independent contractor, mobile technical services, installation and maintenance for commercial clients across a 3-county area. The van was my office, my storage unit, my primary business asset, and the single largest investment I had made in 6 years of building the business from nothing. It had taken me 2 years of double shifts to purchase it outright. No loan. Cash. Because I had learned early in my professional life that a debt on your primary business asset is a vulnerability you cannot afford. The interior was custom fitted. Racking systems for equipment. A climate-controlled storage section for sensitive components. An integrated workstation console. A commercial GPS system with telemetry logging. And the dashcam unit, a commercial-grade device I had installed specifically because my vehicle spent significant time in locations that insurance companies do not love, and I needed documentation. Marcus had been asking to borrow it for 4 months before I said yes the first time. He went through phases of asking, sometimes persistently for a week, then dropping it, then coming back a month later with a new angle. The girlfriend angle was the one that eventually got traction, not because I believed it entirely, but because I was tired of the conversation and because my parents had, by that point, applied enough pressure in his direction that refusing felt like choosing a fight I had not budgeted for. My parents. I should tell you about my parents. My father worked. My mother managed. And Marcus was the thing they had always managed most carefully, the youngest, the one who had struggled in school, the one who had gone through 3 jobs in 2 years and a business venture that had ended badly enough that I had covered 2 months of his rent while he got back on his feet. He's just finding himself, my mother said, with the regularity of a statement repeated until it becomes true by sheer force of repetition. You have a solid income. You have stability. Stop being so dramatic and help your brother. I helped. I helped because I am the older sibling and because I understood, from the inside of my own experience building something from nothing, what it felt like to be struggling, and I did not want to be the person who withheld help when help was possible. What I did not understand yet was that there is a difference between helping someone who is trying to stand up and helping someone who is using your steadiness as cover for the fact that they have no intention of standing. The first time Marcus borrowed the van, he came back at 2:15 in the morning. He said the girl had wanted to talk. I checked the odometer, 68 miles. He said she lived 30 miles away. I noted the discrepancy and told myself there was probably a detour. The second time, 72 miles. A faint smell in the cargo area that I identified as industrial solvent and could not explain. The third time, the first scratch on the undercarriage. Diagonal. The kind of mark that comes from backing over something low and metal in the dark. The fourth time, his hands. Every time, I had a reason to be concerned. Every time, I had a family context that made raising the concern feel more costly than absorbing it. That is the specific mechanism by which family enables harm, not through love, but through the accumulated cost of conflict that makes silence feel cheaper than the truth. Until the night the truth becomes non-negotiable. That night was tonight. And the audio was loading. The files were organized by date and timestamp. I went to the most recent session first, tonight's drive, beginning at 11:04 p.m. when Marcus had left and ending at the session termination point when he returned. The front camera was dark. The velvet cloth he had taped over the lens blocked everything visual. The audio was perfect. Commercial dashcam microphones are designed for the specific acoustic environment of a vehicle interior. They filter road noise and engine sound and isolate voices with a precision that a phone recording would not achieve. This one had 2 internal microphones, front and rear cabin, and the rear cabin mic had been recording everything that happened in the cargo area for 3 months. I will not play you the audio. But I will tell you what was on it, exactly and in sequence, because you need to understand what I understood in that van in the dark at 2:30 in the morning. The session began with Marcus driving. His voice in the front cabin, on a phone call, speaking in the clipped, abbreviated shorthand of someone communicating a plan they have communicated before. A meeting point. A time. An address I did not recognize. 40 minutes of driving. Then the van stopped. Then voices. Not just Marcus. 2 other men, their voices picking up as they entered the cargo area. The specific acoustics of the rear cabin mic capturing them clearly. And then the sounds. I want to describe them carefully, because the sounds were the evidence before the words were. The metallic clink of tools being handled. The specific sound of a power cutter, not running, being positioned. The sound of cable being pulled through a conduit, which has a resistance to it, a friction, that is not like any other sound. The sound of something heavy being loaded into a vehicle cargo area. And Marcus's voice, directing. Confident. Familiar with the process. And then a sentence that I played twice to make sure I had heard it correctly. Don't worry about the van, my brother is a clueless idiot who leaves the keys in the mudroom. He'll never check the back. I took the headphones off. I sat in the dark of the van for a moment. Not because I needed time to process what I had heard, the processing had happened fast, the way processing happens when the information is clear and the implications are immediate. I sat because I was making a decision, and I wanted to make it correctly. The decision was this: my brother had been using my vehicle to commit commercial theft across multiple jurisdictions. He had chosen my vehicle specifically because my license plate would not trigger the automatic plate readers near the crime scenes, meaning that if the operation was ever investigated, the first vehicle the investigators would look at was mine. I was not a passive bystander in this situation. I was, by the technical definition of the law, a potential accomplice, not because I had participated, but because my asset was the instrument and my silence was the shield. I had 2 options. I could protect my brother. Which meant protecting a crime ring at the cost of my business, my license, my legal standing, and every year of work that had gone into building both. Or I could protect myself. It was not a difficult decision. It was a painful one. Those are different things. Difficult means the right answer is unclear. Painful means the right answer is clear and it costs you something to act on it. I had a very clear answer. And I was about to pay the cost. I opened the Dashcam application on my tablet. I exported the audio logs, all of them, every session, 3 months of recordings, onto an encrypted drive I kept in the workstation console. I pulled the GPS telemetry data, which showed the precise route of every drive Marcus had taken in my vehicle, with timestamps accurate to the second. I cross-referenced 2 of the routes against my memory of recent news. The construction site on the Eastern County line. The commercial property on Route 7 that had been in the local paper last month. Both addresses appeared on the telemetry map. Both on nights Marcus had borrowed the van. I plugged the encrypted drive into my pocket. I locked the van. I went inside and went to bed for 2 hours. At 4:30 in the morning, I got up, got dressed, and drove to the state police precinct. The state police precinct at 4:30 in the morning is a different kind of place than it is at noon. The fluorescent lights are the same. The institutional furniture is the same. But the quality of attention is different, sharper, more focused, the attention of people who have chosen a profession that requires them to be functional at hours when most people are not. I went to the duty desk. I told the officer I had evidence related to a commercial theft ring operating across multiple county jurisdictions and that I needed to speak with an investigator. I told her that the vehicle involved was mine and that I had audio and GPS telemetry documentation of multiple incidents. She looked at me for a moment with the evaluating expression of someone who hears a lot of claims at 4:30 in the morning and has learned to distinguish the ones that are real. She picked up her phone. The investigator who came out was a woman named Detective Carver. She was unhurried and direct, the manner of someone who has been doing this long enough to know that what matters is the evidence, not the presentation, and that a person who comes in at 4:30 in the morning with an encrypted drive and a GPS telemetry map has already done more organizational work than most witnesses manage. We sat in a small room. I laid out the drive. I explained the Dashcam system, the cloud backup, the audio files, the GPS telemetry, the route cross-references I had identified. I explained my brother's borrowing pattern, the timeline, the physical evidence I had noticed on his return each night. She listened without interrupting. She took notes. At certain points she asked a precise question and I answered it precisely. When I finished, she looked at me. "You understand that by bringing this to us voluntarily, you're cooperating with an active investigation," she said. "And that cooperation protects your business assets from any potential seizure proceedings." "Yes," I said. "I understand that. You also understand that this will result in your brother's arrest." "I understand that," I said. She nodded once. She picked up the drive. And she said, "We'll need you available this morning. The warrant process moves quickly with this level of documentation." I gave her my number. I drove home. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table and waited for the sun to come up. There is a specific kind of stillness that exists after a decision like that. Not peace, exactly, peace implies the resolution of conflict, and the conflict was not yet resolved. More like the stillness of a system that has been set in motion and is now moving at its own speed, independent of anyone's feelings about the direction. I had set it in motion. It was moving. And there was nothing left to do but wait for it to arrive. By 10 o'clock, the family had been in the kitchen for 2 hours and had already arrived at their conclusions. My mother had been briefed by Marcus, who had apparently gotten up early and provided a preemptive account of the previous night's events that cast my odometer check as a form of surveillance and my get-to-bed as a power play. By the time I came downstairs, the narrative was established. I had been controlling, paranoid, and uncharitable to a brother who was simply trying to maintain a relationship while dealing with a difficult personal period. My mother was telling this story to my father, who was nodding with the expression of a man who has long ago decided that agreeing is the path of least resistance in this household. Marcus was at the table, eating breakfast, completely unbothered. That is the thing I remember most clearly about those 2 hours, his breakfast. The specific, deliberate calm of a man eating eggs at 10 in the morning who believes the night's activities are behind him and the morning's narrative is under control. The fork moving between plate and mouth with the rhythm of someone who considers themselves safe. My mother turned to me when I came in. "You need to stop treating your brother like a suspect," she said. "He has enough to deal with without you checking his mileage like some kind of warden." He told me what happened in the garage. That was completely uncalled for. I got a glass of water. I stood at the counter. "I'm not going to argue about this," I said. She was not finished. She had more, the particular momentum of a prepared argument that has not yet reached its conclusion. She was explaining the importance of trust within families, the damage that suspicion does to sibling relationships, the way my need for control had been a pattern since childhood. Marcus was still eating. My father was nodding. And then the front door. Not a knock. A knock implies requesting entry. What happened was more direct than that. The screen door opened with the specific authority of people who have a legal instrument that makes the question of permission irrelevant. Detective Carver came in first. 2 other investigators behind her. One of them was carrying a document, a folder, formal, the kind that contains things that have been signed by a judge. The kitchen went completely silent. Marcus put his fork down. Detective Carver had the specific, practiced calm of someone who has done this many times and has learned that the calmest person in the room controls the room. She identified herself. She presented the warrant. She explained, in the flat, procedural language of someone reading from the framework of the law, that the warrant covered the premises and authorized the arrest of Marcus Jensen on charges of grand larceny, criminal conspiracy to commit commercial burglary, and use of a third party's vehicle in the commission of a felony. My mother's response was immediate and rehearsed. She had a script for this. I could hear it in the rhythm of it, the way certain sentences came too quickly and in too perfect a sequence to be improvised. This is a mistake. My son is an innocent person. His brother is trying to create drama over a family disagreement. Whatever you've been told, it's been completely taken out of context. Detective Carver let her finish. Then she opened the folder. She placed a document on the kitchen table. It was a forensic report, tire tread analysis, chassis scratch pattern matching, the specific measurements of the damage on my van's undercarriage cross-referenced against physical evidence recovered from the commercial burglary site on the Eastern County line. The vehicle used in the incident at 1:14 this morning has been forensically matched to the registered work van, Detective Carver said. The tire tread depth and the chassis scratch pattern are consistent with the recovered evidence from the scene. My mother opened her mouth. Detective Carver held up one finger. A single, calm, non-confrontational gesture that said, "I am not finished." She reached into the folder. She produced a small playback device. She set it on the kitchen table. She pressed play. Marcus's voice filled the kitchen. Clear. High definition. Unmistakable in the way that a person's voice is unmistakable to the people who have known it their whole lives. Stating the address of the site. Confirming the equipment list. Directing the operation with the confidence of someone who has done this before and expects to continue doing it. And then? Don't worry about the van. My brother is a clueless idiot who leaves the keys in the mudroom. He'll never check the back. My mother's script dissolved. My father stopped nodding. Marcus's hands, which had been flat on the table, moved to the edge of it. As if he were about to stand. As if standing were still an option. It was not. Detective Carver nodded to the investigator behind her. The investigator came around the table. He said Marcus's name and asked him to stand and place his hands behind his back, which he did with the specific, deflating compliance of someone who has run out of moves. The handcuffs were not loud. They clicked into place with the quiet precision of a mechanism doing what it was designed to do. I was standing by the kitchen doorway. I had not moved during any of this. I had my hands in my pockets. I watched my brother being walked past me toward the front door with the steady, unblinking attention of someone who has been awake since 2 in the morning and has already done everything they needed to do. He looked at me as he passed. I did not look away. I did not say anything. There was nothing left to say that the audio had not already said more clearly than I could have. My father followed me to the driveway. The transport vehicle was pulling away from the curb. Marcus was in the back of it. My father watched it go with the expression of a man watching something he had always refused to see finally become impossible to look away from. Then he turned to me. His face was the particular color that faces go when someone is running on grief and rage simultaneously and has not yet separated one from the other. You handed them the files, he said. You handed your own brother to the police. You've ruined his life over a piece of machinery. I looked at him. I thought about 2:30 in the morning in the van. The headphones. My brother's voice. The confidence in it. The contempt in it. The specific word he had used for me. I thought about the construction site on the Eastern County line. The family whose equipment had been stripped. The business that had been set back by the cost of what was taken. The people who had been harmed by what my van had been used to do. I thought about 3 months of missing fuel and unexplained scratches and the smell of industrial solvent that I had talked myself out of asking about. I looked at my father. He didn't borrow my car to drive, I said. He borrowed my life to hide his crimes. You wanted me to protect him. I chose to protect reality. I picked up my workstation keys from the hook by the garage door. I walked to the van. I got in. I locked the doors. I looked at the dashboard camera. The blue recording light was steady and calm. I started the engine. I drove away. He said I ruined my brother's life. My brother had been building the ruin for months, methodically, in the back of my vehicle, at 1 a.m, using my name and my license plate as his alibi. I did not ruin anything. I simply stopped being the shield between his choices and their consequences. The charges were not reduced. I want to say that plainly, because in family situations involving criminal charges there is often a period of negotiation, attorneys getting involved, charges being plea bargained down, consequences being softened by the intervention of people who love the defendant and are willing to spend money to cushion the impact of what their choices have produced. That did not happen here. The charges were grand larceny and criminal conspiracy to commit commercial burglary, both at the state level, which meant the district attorney's office was the decision-maker and the family's feelings about the matter were not a relevant input. The audio evidence was, according to Detective Carver, who kept me informed at appropriate intervals throughout the process, unusually clean. Commercial dashcam audio with cloud backup and a precise telemetry record does not leave much room for a defense attorney to work with. Marcus took a plea deal. The terms were not generous. Mandatory sentencing guidelines for multi-jurisdictional commercial theft are not designed to be generous. They are designed to deter. My business assets were formally cleared within 2 weeks of my voluntary cooperation. Detective Carver had been correct about that. When you walk into a precinct at 4:30 in the morning with an encrypted drive and lay out the evidence before anyone asks you to, the legal system's posture toward you is categorically different than it would be if you were subpoenaed. I was never a suspect. I was a cooperating witness. The distinction matters enormously in practice. The van had to be held as evidence for 6 weeks. I rented a replacement vehicle during that period, an unpleasant but manageable expense, and one that was significantly less than the cost of being implicated in a multi-county theft ring. My parents tried. Not to apologize, exactly, the apology never quite arrived in a form that acknowledged what actually happened. But they tried to re-establish contact in the way that families do after a crisis, the checking in messages, the holiday texts, the occasional photograph of something that implied continuity. I read them. I did not respond. Not out of anger. Anger requires sustained engagement, and I had disengaged. Out of the recognition that the conversations available to me within that family system were conversations that required me to absorb a version of events that was not accurate, in exchange for the connection. And that trade was no longer one I was willing to make. I moved my business operations to a new facility 4 months after the arrest. A commercial space in a different part of the county, good security, controlled access, a parking area with professional-grade lighting and a camera system that I had selected personally and configured myself. I blocked the numbers that had sent me the guilt messages. Not all of them, an aunt who had been kind to me over the years got a reply. But the ones whose messages were a version of "you destroyed this family," those I blocked with the clean, decided motion of someone removing a variable from an equation that is now solved. Marcus had said I was a clueless idiot who would never check the back. He was wrong about the checking. He was wrong about the idiot. And he was wrong, most significantly, about the back, because the microphone that recorded everything he said was not in the back. It was in the cabin. Right behind his head. Listening to every word he said for 3 months with perfect, cloud-backed fidelity. He had underestimated the infrastructure. And the infrastructure had not underestimated him. I want to talk to you about gut feelings. Not the dramatic kind. Not the movie version where the protagonist suddenly realizes the truth in a flash of insight and acts immediately. The real kind. The slow, persistent, inconvenient kind that shows up as a question you keep not asking, a pattern you keep finding explanations for, a number that almost adds up and doesn't quite. I had a gut feeling about Marcus for 2 months before I did anything about it. 2 months of missing fuel and unexplained mileage and chemical smells I identified and then decided not to investigate. 2 months of my instincts telling me something was wrong and my family system telling me that acting on that instinct was controlling, paranoid, and uncharitable. That is how it works. That is the specific mechanism by which family enables harm, not through love, but through the accumulated cost of conflict. Every time you follow your instinct, you pay a social price. The accusation of being difficult. The lecture about trust. The implication that your concern is a character flaw rather than a rational response to evidence. Eventually the price feels higher than the cost of ignoring what you know. Until the cost of ignoring it becomes non-negotiable. For me, non-negotiable arrived at 2 in the morning in the form of my brother's voice on a recording, describing me as a clueless idiot and my vehicle as his personal alibi generator. At that point, the social cost of conflict was no longer the relevant calculation. The relevant calculation was, do I protect the person who is using me, or do I protect myself? I protected myself. And I want to say something about that decision, because I think there is a version of this story that makes it sound easy. That the choice was obvious because Marcus had done something obviously wrong and therefore the decision to report was obviously correct. The choice was not easy. It was clear. Those are different things. Clear means the right answer is visible. Easy means acting on it doesn't cost you anything. The right answer was visible from the moment I put the headphones on. The cost of acting on it was my brother's freedom, my family's configuration, and whatever version of a sibling relationship had been possible between us before that night. Clarity is not comfort. But it is navigable. And I have found, in the months since, that living inside a clear decision, even a costly one, is infinitely more sustainable than living inside an unclear one that costs you a little every day in the form of silent complicity. I want to say something practical, because I think practical matters in a story about evidence and consequences. Document your assets. Know what your equipment can record. Understand the legal implications of what happens when your name and your property are attached to someone else's actions. Because the law does not ask whether you knew. It asks whether your asset was the instrument and whether you acted to protect yourself when you found out. I acted. At 4:30 in the morning, before anyone told me to, before there was any external pressure to do so. That proactive cooperation was the single most important professional decision I made in the entire situation. It protected my business, my assets, my license, and my legal standing. Know your systems. Configure your recording devices correctly. Keep the cloud backup active. And trust the gut feeling that tells you something is wrong, because the gut feeling is usually the last to arrive at a conclusion that the evidence has been building toward for longer than you have been paying attention. My brother called me a clueless idiot. He was operating under the assumption that my silence was compliance and my trust was blindness. He had confused my patience with my limit. Those are not the same thing. Before you go, I want to tell you where I am now. I am sitting in my new commercial office space. The space is clean and quiet and has the specific, neutral smell of a place that is organized around function rather than history. The lighting is good. The security system is professional grade. The access control is set to my specifications. Through the window, I can see the van. It is parked under a floodlight in the secure lot. The dashcam light on the dashboard blinks blue, steady, regular, the signal of a system that is recording and backed up and functioning exactly as it should. It is recording nothing interesting. The parking lot is quiet. The night is clear. That is what peace actually looks like when you build it correctly. Not the dramatic, cinematic version of peace, the reconciled family, the healed relationship, the lesson learned and forgiven. The real version. A quiet parking lot. A working system. The knowledge that what you have built is protected by infrastructure you chose and configured yourself and that no one can access without your authorization. I want to ask you something real before you go. Is there a gut feeling in your life right now that you have been explaining away? A pattern that almost adds up and doesn't quite. Someone whose access to your resources, your assets, your name, or your silence costs you something every time and you keep absorbing it because the alternative feels more expensive? I am not telling you to go to the police. I am not telling you the answer is always confrontation or evidence or a 4:30 a.m. drive to a precinct. I am telling you to stop explaining away the gut feeling. To look at the pattern for what it is rather than for what you need it to be. To understand that your silence is not neutral, that in certain situations, your silence is the infrastructure someone else is building their operation on. And that you are allowed to stop being that infrastructure whenever you choose. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own legal and personal safety? Have you had a gut feeling you ignored longer than you should have? Tell me your story. I read every one. If this reminded you to trust your instincts and verify the data, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I'm sitting in a clean office. My van is parked under a floodlight. The dashcam is recording nothing but peace. That's enough.